Alright, we're back with another redrafting. This time we're doing the 97 and 98 NFL draft. We're just keeping up with it until we get to Christmas, and then that's going to be the past draft we did this year. Alright, so 97 draft, it had a decent amount of talent. Number one pick was the Rams, and then, as you remember last time, they took Jonathan Ogden. And now, I think this time they stick with linemen. Originally they took Orlando Pace, but I mean, I think me and you could both agree that Walter Jones is better than him.
Yeah, probably.
And Walter Jones played his whole career with the same team. And then Orlando Pace, when he was at the Bears, he was not the same player.
Mm-hmm.
All right, number two pick was the Raiders, and they took a guy named Darrell Russell, who wasn't that good. And this time they go with Tony Gonzalez. I mean, what's there to really say about the guy? He's the best tight end of all time. He has almost every tight end record. And he played he had a long career for 15 years probably. All right, next the Seahawks. The original pick was Sean Springs. They actually had two first-round picks right next to each other. They took Sean Springs and Walter Jones. This time, since they missed out on Walter Jones, they settled with Orlando Pace, and it's not a bad consolation prize.
Yeah.
All right, next is the Ravens. They took Peter Boulware, who was in Mutt before. He was a pretty good player. I think he had around 70 sacks for his career. He played outside linebacker at a time when 3-4 defenses weren't really a thing yet. So he's kind of before his time. They take a guy that could play defensive end or outside linebacker, and Jason Taylor. And I mean, he was a great player, a stand-up guy, great in the locker room, great on the field, off the field. Had over 100 and I think he had 130 career sacks around there. Next, Lions. They took Bryant Westbrook. No, not Brian Westbrook. Bryant, his brother, was a corner. And that guy, that guy wishes he was as good as him. Now they settle for Peter Boulware. He's a great pass rusher. You can't go wrong with pass rushing. Number 6 is the Hawks again. They took Walter Jones the first time. With him gone, they take Trevor Pryce, who, I mean, he was a good defensive end. At this point, the one thing the Seahawks did have going for them, wow, he missed the button. The one thing the Seahawks did have going for them was they had a great defensive line, as 3 of their 4 D linemen accounted for 34.5 sacks. So that's about 10 each guy. And then this guy, Trevor Pryce, had 91 career sacks and 4 Pro Bowls. That builds a great line, similar to today's Seahawks. Giants, they took Ike Hilliard, who was a receiver. I don't think he was that great. I do remember him in some old Madden games, though. Now, if you remember from the last one, the Giants have a core right now on defense of Michael Strahan and Brian Dawkins. It's a scary, scary duo. Now, I think they just stick with. I think the Giants just stick with defense. There's 2 choices here. I'd say they go corner. It's either Sam Madison or Rondé Barber. I mean, you could argue that Madison had a better career. He had made more Pro Bowls than him. But Rondé Barber had a longer career, and he did play in the similar defense that the Giants run with his great Bucs defense. All right, next to the Jets, they took James Farrior, who was the linebacker of the Steelers, if you remember. Then now let's speak of the double, they take Sam Madison this time. I mean, I was leaning running back, but they did have a solid running back at the time who rushed for 1,000 yards. And this team just needs building blocks. I mean, they took Marvin Harrison last draft. They're not too far removed from a 1-15 season. So, I mean, why not put a lockdown corner on the opposite side of the ball? It's Marvin Harrison. Next to Cardinals, I think a guy named Tom Knight, who wasn't that great. Now, this Cardinals team is actually a team on the rise. They have Simeon Rice, who's a stud. They have a few more Pro Bowlers on defense. And now they had Enos Williams, who was a pretty good corner too. He made a couple Pro Bowls. Their quarterback was all right. They had a 1,000-yard receiver, an 800-yard receiver too. The thing they really needed was a tailback, since their running back could only muster 600 rushing yards in 15 games, which is not great. Now, there's 4 running backs in this draft that are all very, very similar. So they have multiple Pro Bowls to their name, and they all have over 10,000 rushing yards, except maybe one of them. I'd say And the 4 of them are Work Done, Tiki Barber, Corey Dillon, and Priest Holmes. I'd say they go with Priest Holmes because he has the most talent and the most potential, even though he got injured late in his career. But he was an absolute monster. He broke the rushing record with 27 touchdowns. He also had. He's also the only player besides Emmitt Smith to have 2 seasons with 20-plus rushing touchdowns.
And he played for him behind a way worse line than this.
Yeah, I put it on a way worse line, and he was just really good. Too bad he got hurt because his team was kind of bad.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. It seems to happen with a lot of Chiefs running backs that suffer from injury.
Yeah. Well, Charles the most recent.
So then they had Larry Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
All right, next to the Saints, they took a guy named Chris Noel, who was a guard. He wasn't that great. This team really needs some help. They suck. Their defense wasn't bad though. They were 16th in total points and 4th in yards allowed, but it's to be expected if you're coached by Ditka.
Mm-hmm.
Listen to this though. Their quarterbacks had 13 touchdowns and 33 interceptions.
That's terrible.
That's ridiculous. And their leading receiver had over 700 yards. I don't know how he did that. And their leading running back, a rusher, was their fullback. So that offense was just trash. So I'd say they go running back. I mean, there's Barber, Work Done, and Corey Dillon. I'd say you go with Corey Dillon just because he has the ability to catch the ball, so he can take pressure off him. Next to Falcons, they took Michael Booker, who was, I guess he was all right. The new pick. All right, well, about this Falcons team, they were on the rise. They had a 3,000-yard passer, a 1,000-yard rusher, so they weren't bad on offense. The biggest problem is their defense. They couldn't force a turnover. They only intercepted 6 passes all year. So they need a playmaker badly, and who better than Darren Sharper?
Great ball hawk.
Yeah, he was just a ball hawk. He had 63 interceptions in his career, and he's tied with Charles Woodson and Ed Reed for most defensive touchdowns at 13. Number 12 picks the Bucks, and the Bucks are building a good defense. They have Derek Brooks, Leroy Glover, and John Lynch. Although it's leading secondary, but with Sharper gone, there's not really any good corners to take. I mean, there's Sean Springs and Al Harris, who both made a few Pro Bowls, but I think it was just a product of a good team around him. So Al Harris, he didn't start making Pro Bowls till he was in Green Bay, and he had Charles Woodson next to him. He had a couple good safeties there too. I'd say the Bucks stick with the original pick and go with Work Done. They had Allstott. Allstott could run, but he's a great blocker too. And Dunn's rookie year as a team anyway. He made the Pro Bowl and won Rookie of the Year. I mean, you can't really ask for much for that. All right, next Chiefs. With Tony Gonzalez gone, they stick with tight end and go with Chad Lewis. I mean, there's no comparing to Tony Gonzalez, but Lewis was okay. He made 3 Pro Bowls at tight end in a time when tight ends weren't really that involved much in offense. All right, next we go 98 draft. Number 1, the Colts took Peyton Manning. Obviously, you guys stick with him. He is the top 3 quarterback all time. Next, Chargers. Yeah, you know they took that bust Ryan Leaf. This time they take Randy Moss. And then you're gonna get Drew Brees a couple years later probably. And then Philip Rivers maybe. Number 3 is the Cardinals. Cardinals, they did have Simeon Rice. So they had a couple good pieces on defense. And so, I mean, I'd say they stick with defense and go Charles Woodson. I mean, there's not really anybody else to take that's worth it. Charles Woodson's a stud.
Was he play corner, safety, and you're getting all pro player out of him?
Yeah, you got him and Simeon Rice in your secondary. All right, now with the Raiders up, Woodson's gone. They take Alan Faneca, who is a multiple-time Pro Bowler on offensive line. Next pick's the Bears. They took Curtis Enis, who was a running back how long did he last there?
I think 2 or 3 years on him.
Yeah, just complete bust. They take the best running back in the draft, Amon Green, who was a pretty great player. Next is the Rams. They took some guy named Grant Windstrom, who I don't know who that was. And I mean, at this time, the Rams are building a pretty solid team. So they have a great offensive line right now, and they have a great running back in Jerome Bettis. So I'd say they go defense and take Leonard Little, who they drafted this year, but they drafted him in the 3rd round. I'd say they draft him 6th. I mean, the guy had around 80 sacks for them. He won a Super Bowl with the team. Next, the Saints. They took a guy named Kyle Turley, who was a 2-time Pro Bowl. And then I'd say his tackle. And I mean, they stick with tackle here because you just need some pieces. So I'd say the best tackle in the draft was probably Flozell Adams. He was only 1-time All-Pro. You have Trey Johnson, who was 3-time All-Pro, and Turley, who was 2, but Flozell did make 5 Pro Bowls compared to them. Next, Cowboys, they stick with their pick, Greg Ellis, who would be he'd be part of their core in the defense. Next is the Jaguars. They took Fred Taylor. I'd say you stick with Fred Taylor. He's a solid running back for them. He lasted a long time, over 10 years, until Maurice Jones-Drew came in. And he still was a great backup on the team. Number 10 is the Ravens. They took Dwayne Starks. I'd say this time, well, at this point, the Ravens do have Terrell Owens that they drafted before, and they drafted Orlando Pace. So I'd say they put their division rival in their lineup, and they take Hines Ward and put him next to Terrell Owens. And even though Hines Ward is kind of overrated in my opinion, he'd still look great next to Terrell Owens.
But he's what, 7 years old, I
Yeah, he'd fit perfectly wearing that Ravens uniform.
Yeah.
Even though it's kind of weird to imagine him wearing it. Some other notable players drafted. I mean, the next couple picks were Pro Bowlers. A lot of people in draft were 2, 3-time Pro Bowlers, but no one really looks like a can't miss talent. So some notable players: Matt Hasselbeck, Jamal Williams, London Fletcher, Jeremiah Trotter, Olin Kreutz, and Jeff Saturday. There's the video. We'll be back in the next 2 days with the 99 and 2000 draft.